We cannot learn that which we think we already know. In this day and age, in the information age, I think it is harder than ever for people to admit that they do not know that which they do not know. It's almost like subconsciously we feel guilty in this day of information and this day of everyone having an opinion to not have an opinion. And whilst not having an opinion, to not die on it on the metaphorical hill of a half-baked opinion that we just came up with while the conversation was going on, to act like we were informed, to act like we knew more than we knew. And when we do that, we truly harden our hearts to the idea of learning. We truly make it impossible to learn because we believe we already know that which we know. And the person is not, what the person is saying is not fitting into our narrative. It's not fitting into our worldview. And it's much easier to die on a metaphorical hill that conforms to your worldview than to accept another worldview, to change your way of thinking, and to become vulnerable to the truth. And if you don't believe the truth will set you free, then you will do this time and time again. And as I said with the information age, I think more than ever, I mean, I think, as it says in Ecclesiastes, nothing new under the sun. And, I have a book behind me by Morgan Housel, Same as Ever, which is a very good book. And it has that same idea. And I think this has always been a problem, people thinking they know that which they do not. But to me, it almost seems like in this day and age that we live in today, it may be worse than ever before because information is more than ever before. If you didn't have access to something, it was it was more comfortable to admit ignorance to it. It was like, oh yes, okay, you have that book. I do not have that book. Therefore, it makes sense that you have more knowledge than I. But nowadays, it's not even the fact that you may not have that book or you may not have heard that video or this, that, or the other. It's oh, I have access to the same things you have access to, but I don't have that same opinion. If I admit that I am ignorant, then it just shows a lack of care. And I don't want to be considered ignorant. And part of this video is talking about how to deal with those people, how to deal with those people who refuse to learn that which they know. Because I think so often we can get frustrated and we can start spewing off the facts and the reasons and be rational. And the meanwhile, they're closed minded, they've hardened their hearts. And I think when you start adding facts to a hardened heart, you harden the heart even more. Because when they come to their senses and they become open again, even if they want to accept that view, they just died 1,000 deaths on the metaphorical hill. And if they just died one death on the hill, then, maybe it's easier to say, okay, you were right. I looked into it a little more. I thought a little bit more about what you were saying. It makes sense. But when you have an hour conversation that turns combative, it's harder for that person to come over to your way of thinking, or it's harder for them to see the truth. So when you're dealing with a person with a hardened heart, silence speaks louder than words. And giving them time to unharden their heart will do wonders. The Plato's Republic opens up with the line where this guy says something like, "You must come with me, Socrates, to so and so's house." And Socrates says, "What if we decline?" And he says, "Then I will forcefully bring you." And then Socrates says, "Well, what if we can convince you that it is not to your benefit to forcefully bring us?" And the guy says, "Do you really think you can change my mind when I refuse to listen. And it's symbolic, as it's symbolic for the republic, as the whole republic is a symbol for the soul and a symbol for the man, and also a symbol for society. But it's a huge, profound, because it raises the question on one of the first few pages of the republic, if not the first. What do you do when someone's heart is hardened and they refuse to listen? They refuse to listen to rationality. They refuse to listen to sound advice. They refuse the facts. What do you do? What can you do? Do you really think you can convince them if they refuse to listen? And I think more than ever, for the points I just stated, we live in a day and age of that nature because no one wants to seem ignorant. If you ask someone if they are ignorant, they will say no. If you ask someone if they are closed minded, they will say no. If you ask someone if they are evil, they will say no. But we clearly live in a day and age with so much evil, so much closed mindedness, and I recently just thought that it was almost the reason of the information age. Because it's more than ever, it's embarrassing to be ignorant. Because more than ever, you have no reason to be ignorant of anything. It's all at our fingertips. And I think, as I said, when we deal with people with hardened hearts, silence speaks louder than words. And you need to wait for the heart to be unhardened. You know, and to move away from other people, we need to move to ourselves. And to realize that we have the same capacity to do this. We die on half-baked opinions all the time. We we refuse to turn over leave of an idea of, oh yes, that's what I wanted to talk about as well. I wanted to talk about, sorry for ending that point, but the video is more in service to this point, and I just remembered. When you truly want to convince somebody, because I mean, I think the goal in, we want to make people better. We want to do people good. We want to help people. And if you truly want to help people, you have to let them come to the idea on their own. Shoveling facts down a fool's throat will do nothing. In Proverbs it says, "The wise love to be rebuked, and the fools hate to be rebuked." And the wise person who loves to be rebuked is so often not the person that you're shoveling facts down the throat, because it doesn't get to that point where you need to shovel facts down their throat while their heart is hardened. But the fool hates to be rebuked. The fool hates to be told he's wrong and then to given a list of reasons why. But if you can lay out the groundwork for the fool, if you can show the fool where he has misstepped, and you can show him the path, and somehow convince him that he found the path on his own, and lead him, guide him, but make him think that you're no longer there. It's like when you're behind a child and they just put the training wheels off, and you're behind them and you're saying, "Oh, I'm not there," but you're holding them a little straight, but they can't feel it, they don't know. And then eventually, you feel they're sturdy enough, and you say, "See, look," but you were there for a while, and they didn't think so, and then you let go, and something changed, but nothing changed in their mind. They've been doing it on their own for a long time now, even though they just started. And that's almost how we have to treat the fool. We have to guide them to the right path. And I think that's what Socrates did so well. Socrates posed questions. And even then, the fools hated Socrates, but the why, it really is a slippery slope. But, Alcibiades, it is said, from my understanding, if you do not know who Alcibiades is, he was a great warrior, turned general in Athens, and he almost turned the tide of the Peloponnesian War. But then Athens, I think the 30 Tyrants were jealous of him. And I think the 30 Tyrants was after the Peloponnesian War. But I think the people were jealous of Alcibiades after he saved Athens from a deadly battle with Sparta or something. And then they exiled him, and that, and he was like the best general they had. And but that's beside the point. But that's Alcibiades, and Socrates apparently saw much hope in Alcibiades, and he questioned Alcibiades. And Alcibiades, he wasn't like the others. The questions ached at him. He thought, I've been so wrong for so long, Socrates, and you showed me the way. And he did this through questioning. And Alcibiades, to a certain degree, probably felt like he came to the conclusions, but Socrates was his guide. Socrates knew the truths, but if you don't come to the truths on your own, there's almost a little disdain in you. You think, I don't, it's not really my idea. I wish it was mine. But when you can come to it on your own, or help the fool come to it on his own, he will accept your point of views more. And you already know where you're trying to guide him, so it's easier to set up the framework. And that is how we deal with people who think they know, but they don't know. Because the goal is to help them learn. The goal is to right their wrongs, and the goal is to help them. They're not willingly deprived of the truths. And that is why we do this. And there's nothing wrong with being a fool per se. I'm a fool. But I do not wish to continue to be a fool. So I hope people use this tactic on me. And I will try to use this tactic on people I think I'm a little less foolish than, to try to help them see the points, to guide towards the light, to become wiser, to enjoy life more, and to not hold on to falsehoods for no reason. Because I do believe the truth will set us free. And yeah, that was really one of the main points of the video, was how we combat that person. And it's so powerful. That's what I was saying earlier, where silence sometimes speaks louder than words. You say, huh, try to come up with a good example. I might have to give a vague example, but say a person is he's having a hard time dealing with um being focused, and you notice he's on his phone all the time. You notice he's just scrolling on social media constantly, and you're saying, and you realize, you're like, dude, that's definitely messing up his focus. That's definitely messing up his attention. But you don't want to call out his phone abuse. You don't want to say that he needs to stop. It's ruining his attention. It's trivial. It's a waste of time. He's foolish for doing so and not coming to the conclusion on his own. But you can say, do you think, how do you think short form content helps you, or helps your focus? I'm like, oh, I don't know. I mean, I learn some good stuff when I'm watching, TikTok, and I enjoy it. I think it's good. Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, but how does it help your focus? Do you find that the short duration inhibits your long form focus in other aspects of your life? And he's like, huh, I never thought about it like that, but it actually might. And then you'd be like, oh, maybe that's why I can't focus all the time. And that's a weak example. I'm sorry, but I think you get the point. When you can help someone, guide them to the way, they're more likely to accept it. And they're more likely to think, oh, I came up with that. I solved my problem. Other than you solving the problem for them. For one, even if they are wise and they accept the rebuke and they just want to learn, it doesn't stick as well. It doesn't stick as well when someone, it's like when you cheat off a test. It doesn't stick as well. But if someone, like, yo, help me with the answer, and you're like, I know you know this, like, and then you lead them, and then like, boom, like, you lead them down the right path to an answer that they already knew, then it's going to stick more. They're going to remember how they got there. They're going to remember the main point of it all. And I think that's what we have to do with everyone, but especially what we have to do with the hardened heart. And when their heart is already hardened, it's hard to do this. That's why if you know the nature of somebody, lead them down the path like this. For lack of a better term, off rip. You don't want to waste your time dealing with a person with a hardened heart. So let your silence speak louder. Let your contentment with their foolery be proof of your wisdom. And don't fall into the same traps. As I said, Proverbs says, the wise love to be rebuked. Love when your opinions are challenged. Love when your worldview is falling apart. Because it's better to learn the truth. It's better to be wrong. It's better to realize that you are wrong than to hold the falsehood for even a second longer. And learn to have the power to hold an opinion that someone is offering you while still holding your opinion, while seeing both sides, and then after coming to your conclusion. Not getting too emotional, not getting too biased, not trying to win the debate. I hate this culture of debating because it doesn't promote conversations. Someone comes into a debate thinking, I have to prove this point. We go into conversations saying, I wonder if my point will stand. A debate is not that nature. A debate is, I'm debating you on what I believe. You're debating me on what you believe, and we'll let the audience decide who made better points. And the worst part about debates too is the winner of the debate isn't always the person who's right. It can be the person who's more charismatic, the person who made people laugh more. You know, I think I think there's like a debate contest. I remember reading about it. But there was like a guy who was like an expert debater or whatever, and a robot. And so the robot had all the information. It was like AI basically. AI had all the information. This guy, you know, whatever he has off the top of his head, and they get a topic that second, and then they got to go in and argue for whatever side the people or the organization decides. And the guy ended up beating the AI with infinite information. The AI should have won. The AI had more information. And I think also the AI had the easier argument um, to prove. But the guy was more charismatic. The guy made the audience laugh. The guy got more personal with it. The AI was just spouting off facts and made better points, but it wasn't as charismatic. And that's why I don't love debates, because I think conversations produce more wisdom, produce more learning, produce more knowledge, because the nature of it is more open. The nature of a debate is closed. And I don't like anything closed minded because it doesn't promote learning. Because you already think you know that which you do not know. And if you do truly know it, then why get so upset trying to convince someone who doesn't, who thinks that they know otherwise? I understand you can be passionate and you just want them to know the truth, but that doesn't mean you should start calling them names and being rude and this, that, and the other. It's not how it works. You should be more composed, and your composure will be proof of your wisdom and will help them come to the truth. So don't lose yourself when you're dealing with a hardened soul. And remember, help people, guide people to the truth, but never stand at the truth pointing, see, right here, this is where you need to go. Because it's like, the kids, say, hey, don't do that. And then they do it. Or, don't think of a pink elephant. And, I led you to the answer. That's how we have to do it.